Om. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trailokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we're in the 5th chapter. I think Deepa said we're starting with verse 21. Is that correct?
Yes.
So let's again review where we are, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint of where we are going. So the topic under discussion in chapters 3, 4, and 5 have been karma yoga. And Krishna has introduced the 5 elements, that is, karma yogis, we want to practice. And we have to understand that this is sequential. The goal of karma yoga is Vasana exhaustion, so that the mind easily can turn inward for contemplation, for meditation. And in fact, the next chapter is Abhyasa Yoga, the yoga of meditation, the yoga of practice. So we're going to get very clear meditative instructions. But notice where it comes in the sequence. So he gives us the karma yoga first. And the inability or the ignorance of this is one of the reasons people have a hard time meditating. If your experience is, I sit in meditation and my mind's a mess and all I can do is think about the things I need to get done, and I can maybe sit there for 5 minutes, then I get up and I start getting active. No blame. That means you've got Vasana pressure. That's what that is. That feeling of being restless is Vasana pressure. What do we do about it? Karma yoga. First principle, act. We do not attain this contemplative life in the beginning by trying to cease our activity through willpower. How should we act? Act according to your inherent latent proclivities, your prakriti, your nature, your swadharma, the law of your own individual being. Ride the horse in the direction it's going. How do we know what our Swadharma is? Pay attention to when you feel joy in what you do, not in what you get, not in the title, not in the having, not in the status, not in the paycheck. Not that these things are not important, but are you feeling a sense of rightness in what you're doing? And that can become an unerring guide through life, where you're supposed to be. When we learned how to distinguish the difference between what I've begun to call our inner 2-year-old, the indulgent part of the mind. I want to have this. I want to have this ice cream. Or, no, I don't want to go to bed. That's not following your bliss. That's not Swadharma. That's petulance. So we have to learn to have some degree of sannyas, of renunciation, of vairagya, to let go of those screaming voices, to get in touch with our sense of rightness. How do I know if it's right? Well, things to start off. It's never just going on vacation and cruises all the time. It's never about just spending a lot of money. It's never about just shopping all the time or eating all the time. Usually, it's about some form of service. So that leads us to the third element in the yajna spirit. Whatever your proclivities are, dedicate them to something larger than your own ego. Serve the society. Be a sevak, be a servant, do seva. Serve God, serve the society. The third element, thy right is to work alone, never to its fruits. Fruits belong to the Lord. We have to let go of our attachment to the outcome. I always love what my friend Rebecca Pelly said. God has given me everything I never knew I really wanted. I may have these ideas of the things I want, what my goals are, but that may not be where I'm supposed to be. So we have to let go of the outcome. Let go of the outcome and let life move us. And then, so act vigorously in the world according to your Swadharma, in the yajna spirit, renouncing our attachment to the fruits of action. And now in chapter 5, we've gone into the subject deeply of our renunciation of the sense of agency. I am not the doer. I am the witnessing consciousness. It's the equipment that does the doing. How? Impelled by the force of the past and the qualities of mind. No point in regretting the past or worrying about the future. It's all going to work out. It's all, in the end, perfect. When I was out walking with my friend Susan on Friday, we talked about the difference between a maze and a labyrinth. Who can tell me the difference between a maze and a labyrinth? Anybody know? You can get lost in a maze. A labyrinth, you start on the path, and even though it may be circuitous and double back on itself, it unerringly takes you to the center. And then you come out by the same path. And the deep spiritual meaning of it is it's a metaphor for your life and my life. Nobody gets a path straight to the center. It's always circuitous. And it seems like you may be going in the wrong direction. If two people walk a labyrinth and they're a couple minutes apart, there are times when they're going in opposite directions. And if we're not trusting, we'll think, oh, I'm doing it wrong. They're doing it right. But unerringly, you are coming home to God. It's all going to work out. Trust, trust, trust. This process exhausts vasana, and we do not create new vasana. Any thoughts on the stuff we've covered? All right, verse 21.
Vayasparsheshva saktatma vindatyatmani yat sukham sabrahma yoga yuktatma sukhamakshayamshnute. With the self unattached to external contacts, he finds happiness in the self. With the self engaged in the editation of the Brahman, he attains endless happiness. I think he means meditation.
Yes, I think there's a misprint there.
Yeah.
So,
want me to read again?
Read the whole thing again, please. Yes.
With the self unattached to external contacts, he finds happiness in the self. With the self engaged in the meditation of the Brahman, he attains endless happiness.
So we have to understand that the use of the word self, Atman, can refer to the body, to the mind, or the ultimate reality. We have to interpret it contingent on context. So in the first part of the verse, he means ultimate reality, I as witnessing consciousness. I am never involved with the activities of the body, the feelings of the mind, the thoughts of the intellect. None of it touches me. Don't believe him. Find out if that's true for yourself. How? As you're moving through the day, positive or negative events happen, just see if you can remember to stop. Introvert your attention. Am I still just that empty witnessing consciousness? Nothing touches me. And most importantly, I am not the agent. It isn't me, myself, that chooses to do this, that, and the other thing. It's only the mind. It's only the mind. Now, here is a great secret. We teach not.
Jim, I think I muted you by mistake. I was muting someone else, but I muted you as well. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That was rude. Okay. So here is, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So there's a great secret that I want to share with you. We frequently teach that we have to be detached from the phenomenal world, to not get involved in our feelings and thoughts and stuff like that. Actually, the mind must be attached to something. The problem is the phenomenal world, feelings and thoughts lead us to sorrow if we attach there. The place to attach the mind is to the self, to Brahman. When the mind comes home, when the mind is absorbed in the self, when it's reveling in the self, we use terms like Atmaramana, reveling in the self. This is the highest form of devotion. This is what satisfies the mind. The great Catholic saint, St. Augustine, said, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee." So as yogis, we could say, my mind was made for self-abidance. My mind is restless until it comes home to the self. So we need both. There is a state that one can get where you work very diligently to renounce your attachment to the world. But if you have no what we would call samadhi, you can't revel in the self, then it feels a bit nihilistic. The world tastes like ashes, but you're not tasting the bliss of the self. You're not having what Shankara calls the riotous revelry in the bliss of the self. We'll go into this more in later classes. Just put that on the shelf. But here, Krishna's indicating it, that we can have this deep, deep experience of intense peace, intense quiet. You finally know where happiness is. So you let go of the world and abide in the self. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
ये हि संस्पर्शजा भोगा दुःखयोनय एव ते आद्यन्तवन्त कौन्तेय न तेषु रमते बुधा. The enjoyments that are born of contacts are only generators of pain, for they have a beginning and an end. O son of Kunti, the wise do not rejoice in them.
So what you find frequently, for example, in Buddhist teaching, they drill home this idea of impermanence. Everything in the world of name and form is impermanent. permanent. I love what Nisargadatta Maharaj says. He says, enjoyment and suffering are the same thing. Because if I get all involved in the enjoyment of an object and my mind attributes the joy there and I develop an attachment, the suffering is inevitable. Why? Because the object is always finite and you frequently get the law of diminishing return. The first chocolate in the C's box is wonderful. When you eat the entire box, you want to barf. You meet someone on Match.com, have a wonderful date with a person. Too bad they live, out of town. You go on Match.com the next night, nothing happens. And again, you keep trying to go back and repeat the event. And even if you get what you want, there's always something around the outside, perhaps, that doesn't work. You get this fabulous job at this wonderful company, but there's just a jerk as a coworker that kind of spoils it all. Or you've got a manager who doesn't know what they're doing. You buy the house. Oh, I'm a house owner now. And then the roof leaks and the pipes burst. And you have termites, etc. Always, always. Up, down, up, down. That's the world. Nothing wrong with the world. What's wrong is I have unrealistic expectations of it. That I think I can manage the world in a way where I have only happiness and no suffering. And Krishna says, let go of your deep involvement with it. Don't worry about it. The wise person doesn't invest their happiness into the world of name and form. Any thoughts on this? Now, I have had students, as we've discussed this karma yoga thing, who think that, oh, what Jim is teaching is if I find the right career, then everything will be okay and I'll be happy and blissful. That's not what I'm saying. Even your swadharma will have its joys and sorrows. It's just a little bit easier when you're not struggling and fighting what you're doing in life. Every job does. Every relationship does. Don't look for infinite happiness from a finite world. Next verse.
Shaknoti heva ya sodhum praksharira vimokshanat grama krodh bhavam vegam sayukta sasukhi nara. He who is able, while still here in this world, to withstand before the liberation from the body, the impulse born out of desire and anger, he is a yogi, he is a happy man.
Yes. So we are afflicted by kama and krodha. Krodha is anger, kama is craving. And we first of all want to understand yoga's definition of anger. Anger is thwarted desire or unmet expectation. And the root of it is craving, expectation, the need to control. I need to have it my way. So the yogi who can move through life, understanding the difference between a preference and an insistence. You will always have preferences. There's nothing wrong with a preference. How do I know it's a preference and not an insistence? Do you lose your serenity when you don't get what you want? Do you lose your serenity when it doesn't work out the way you expected? Can you laugh? Can you let it go? Can you drop it? Now, we're going to start looking at this idea of videha moksha, liberation beyond the body, as opposed to the being jivan mukta, liberated while in the body. Some people think that what you do is you're religious. You do lots of ritual. And if you do ritual, you will acquire punya, merit, and you will expiate papa, sin. And if you acquire enough merit and get rid of enough demerit, when you die, you will go to Brahmaloka, a heavenly realm, and at the end of the age, you are liberated. Is this true or not true? I don't know. Another approach is what we call being jivan mukta, liberated right here, right now, in this very body. This is what Gita is teaching. This is what our tradition teaches. And the good news is, if you are liberated in the body right here, right now, you're also liberated beyond the body. If you're not liberated in this very life, who's to say what's going to happen? No one comes back from the grave to give us a point-by-point primer on it. So, the inspiration here, the teaching is, how do I maximize my freedom right here, right now? Wear your life like a loose garment. Act. Sport with it. Laugh with it. And let go. Let go. Let go. This deep understanding that everything is temporary. And what little joy we get in the world is only a momentary taste of yourself. There's so much more that's available. Next one.
Yontah sukhon tarara mastathanta jyotirevaya sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto dikachati. He who is happy within, who rejoices within, who is illuminated within, that yogi attains absolute freedom or moksha, himself becoming Brahman.
And here the word in Sanskrit that's indicated is nirvanam. Didn't I hear that?
Yeah, it's Brahma Nirvanam.
Yeah. And nirvanam literally means blown out. And the metaphor is that the flame of the lamp, the flame of the candle, is a metaphor for the mind that's always burning, burning, burning. It's like the jiva. It looks like a solid thing, but it's always, I want, more, 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 more. So nirvana is not a place. Nirvana means all that craving is gone. I was talking with Mark before class, Mark Herman. He was raised Jewish. And in the Genesis story, creation is talked about. God creates the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. And for Jews, you observe the Sabbath, keep the Sabbath, keep it holy. You don't work on the Sabbath for an observant Jew. So again, the indication here is keep Sabbath in your heart all the time. Give up struggle. Keep Sabbath rest. Mark, correct me, isn't the greeting in the synagogue for services Shabbat Shalom? Isn't that it?
Probably, yeah. Shabbat Shalom.
And what does that mean?
Shalom is peace.
Yes.
I think it's the Sabbath.
The peace of the Sabbath. Shabbat means Sabbath. Yes. So this is the greeting for Jews on their Sabbath. So that has a mystical meaning. Rest. Let your heart be at peace. Calm and still. As you rest in the Lord. So the mind of the woman of self-realization, the woman of steady wisdom, she moves in the world, but she's not afflicted by sensory experience. All the craving, all the struggling, all the neurotic working is gone. And instead, her mind rests in the self, rests in Brahman, rests in the Lord. This internal Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom. Peace. We get these reminders. One of the greetings you have in Hebrew is Shalom Aleichem, which is the same as in Arabic, Salam Alaikum. What do they both mean? Peace be with you. Peace be with you. And what do we say at the end of so many mantras? Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. This is what Krishna is saying about the person of steady wisdom. Let go of the world and bring your mind home to the self. Next verse.
Labhante brahma nirvana mrishaya kshina kalmashaha chinna dvedhat yatatmana sarvabhuta hiterata. Those rishis obtain absolute freedom or moksha, whose sins have been destroyed, whose dualities are torn asunder, who are self controlled and intent on the welfare of all beings.
So again, those rishis, those wise people who have this peace of nirvana, who are blown out. Let's go through the list of these qualities they have. List them for us again, one by one, please, Deepa.
Sure. Those rishis obtain absolute freedom or moksha.
Yes. So they get absolute freedom. It's not a one-time event. It means all the time. Just like ordinary people never have to do practices to remember that you're a human being and not a goat or a cow or a horse. So also for the woman of wisdom. She never loses the knowledge. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Next idea.
They obtain absolute freedom or moksha, whose sins have been destroyed.
Yes. So again, through this practice of karma yoga, we exhaust these vasanas without creating new ones. Scriptures say the annihilation of the vasanas here and now is termed or considered liberation by the wise. And another way to interpret this, when you see that, oh, I'm not this gross body, I'm not this ulcerated mind, I am the self which has no sin, which has no vasana. None of it touches me. Next idea.
Whose dualities are torn asunder.
Yes. So right now, I am all caught up in thinking these are good events and those are terrible events. I love this person. I can't stand that person. I am over here. The world is out there. All these dvandvas, these pairs of opposites, these dualities. So for the woman or the man of wisdom, it's all Brahman. It's all God. We learn not to resist what we find uncomfortable. We move into it. We're present to it. Oh, isn't that interesting? Even our own mental reactions, they too are God. There is no place where God is absent. Next idea.
Who are self-controlled and intent on the welfare of all people.
So we then have a kind of self-control that comes spontaneously. It's not anymore about willpower. For example, if a child wants to put their hands on the hot stove, it's not too hot, Mummy can say, no, don't touch the stove. And the child, I want to touch it. I want to touch it. I'm curious. I want to touch it. So they have to do willpower. But if they go up and they touch the stove, from that moment on, it takes no willpower not to touch the stove. So when the yogi finally gets that it's my attachment to the world itself, it's my craving that is so problematic. I just got a text today from a friend, a fellow, I didn't know him well. When I used to live in the city, I knew of him. He killed himself this past week. Young man, probably in his 40s. I don't know why. Probably haven't seen him in 20 years. I don't know what was going on in his mind. But something made life intolerable for him. It's so tragic. And so ultimately unnecessary. So the yogi has a different playground. So marvelous. You know, I went to these Christian services and on Good Friday, they read the gospel according to John. And in it, Jesus is brought before the Roman ruler, Pontius Pilate. Pilate can't find anything wrong with this guy. And Pilate asks questions and Jesus answers. And Pilate says, are you a king? And Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. And then they go on. But the last question that Pilate asks him is, what is truth? And in the gospel, Jesus doesn't answer. And I've always had this fantasy that Jesus looks right into his eyes and tunes him up and shows him the truth, the self. And Pilate says, I find no guilt in this man. Fascinating interaction. Fascinating interaction. But you can have this experience. You can know something that overcomes this world. Well, it's not bad. It's just little. That's all. Wonderful, wonderful story. For a yogi, it just makes your mind flash. All right, next verse.
Sorry, I'm still juggling with my screens. Just a second. Kama krodha viyuktanam yatinam yatachetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Absolute freedom or Brahmic bliss exists on all sides for those self controlled ascetics who are free from desire and anger, who have controlled their thoughts, and who have realized the self.
Haven't we done this one?
It's just the same information, but phrased differently.
Okay. So again, absolute Brahmic bliss. That's again this idea of the peace that we get, the deep, deep, abiding peace when the mind is absorbed in the self. And it's everywhere. Why? Because wherever you go, there you are. Beautiful thing about reveling in the self is it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to look your best. It's always available. It's not conditioned on anything except my willingness to let go of my attachments to the world. All I have to do is let go and come home. When Mark and I were talking earlier, he was talking about sitting in the synagogue when it was empty, and he had a sense of spirituality as a child. Yeah, oh, that's cool. But again, that is dependent on that dark, sacred space and no people around. Or if you're a Hindu going to the temple, oh, I went to such and such a temple, or I did a pilgrimage to such and such a place, or when I'm in the Himalayas, or here, if I go to Yosemite or Shasta, there I feel the sacred, or a church. But what Krishna is saying is the place whereon you stand is holy ground. Again, in the Hebrew scripture, when Moses goes up on Mount Zion and he's talking with God, God says, take off your shoes because the place whereon you stand is holy ground. One way of looking at it is, oh, I'm in the presence of God, better take my shoes off. But another way of looking at it is, wherever you are standing is holy ground because you are standing there. Where can you go where you are not? That doesn't mean go barefoot everywhere. It's poetry to explain a deep spiritual principle. The next part of the story I love. Moses says to God, tell me your name. Who shall I say sent me? And some Bible scholars will say the reason is because in the ancient world, if you knew the name of the God, you could control that God through ritual. And God says, I am. Tell them, I am has sent thee. Now that's not God's name like Im's dog food. What he's saying is find out who I am is, and you will know who God is. Who are you? I am. Not the body, not the feelings, not the thoughts, not the ego, not the vasanas. I am. Everywhere. What number are we on?
Yeah, we just finished 26.
Okay, I think we're going to be able to do the whole chapter. 27.
The next two verses are together. So
That's
it's
great.
27, 28. Also, the sandhi in the first line is super complex, so bear with me. Sparshan kritva bahirbayam ashchakshuschaivantare bhruvo pranapano samo kritva nasabhyantaracharino yatendriya manobuddhir muni moksha parayana vigatecha bhayakrodho yasada mukta eva saha. Shutting out all external contacts and fixing the gaze as though between the eyebrows, equalizing the outgoing and incoming breath moving within the nostrils, with senses, mind, and intellect ever controlled, having liberation as a supreme goal, free from desire, fear, and anger, the sage is verily liberated forever.
Yes. So these two verses are what we call liminal material. Something is liminal when it stands as a point between two things. So this verse is the very end of the fifth, going into the sixth. So what we have here is after I've been practicing my karma yoga, and most especially I've been working on this idea I am not the body nor its actions. I am not the mind nor its reactions. I am not the intellect, any of its thoughts. I am not a personal thought of self. Now in meditation, what am I to do? Now, these instructions are aphoristic and they do not say the totality of meditation, but they indicate some important elements. So let's take them one by one. Would you enumerate the first one again for us, Deepa?
Sure. Shutting out all external contacts.
Yes. So this is known as uparati or sense withdrawal. In the Raja Yoga tradition, it's called pratyahara, sense withdrawal. So how do we shut out external contacts? The key is attention to something interior. I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience that you're engrossed in a book and someone starts to speak to you and you don't even hear them. Or you're working really hard on a project and someone asks you a question, you don't even hear it. It isn't that your ears are not working, it's that you're so focused on the book or the work project or something like that. So it's the intense attention to something that allows us to withdraw our senses. So the key to this is to focus on something and let the external world go. I can remember very vividly in 1988, I was studying Shankara's Vivekachudamani with Swamiji and Siddhabhari. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be in the forests, in the foothills of the Himalayas. I'm going to be like a sadhu meditating in the forest. So quiet and so holy. So I leave the ashram and I go off into the forest a bit. So I'm sitting down. First of all, it was really hard to find something comfortable to sit on because the ground was all lumpy with rocks. And the next thing I know, there's bugs everywhere, ants crawling around, things biting you, and then bah, bah, you hear the goats calling from the village people nearby, and honk, honk, as the car's going around a corner on the road. And I just started to laugh and laugh and laugh. There's no escaping the world. That doesn't mean we don't try to minimize it. If you can find a place that's quiet and you can shut out the world, it's useful. But the yogi wants to develop the capacity to not let externals rip off your attention. I have a friend who used to come over and visit, and he says, oh, Jim, I don't know how you can live here. All that traffic noise would just drive me nuts. I'm a yogi. What traffic noise? Half the time I don't even hear it. So, do you get this idea of withdrawing our senses, our attention from the outside? Next idea.
Fixing the gaze as though between the eyebrows.
So this doesn't mean cross your eyes and look at your forehead. What it means is bring the mind to a single point. And by gaze here, we don't mean just the external eyes, we mean our attention. Doesn't really matter too much what you put your attention on. It can be the breath. It can be a mantra. It can be a candle flame. You can close your eyes. You can meditate with your eyes partially open, looking at a wall, looking at a murti, a statue. What it basically means is bring the mind to a point of attention. And when thoughts and feelings arise, we don't resist them. We don't fight them. Don't get engaged in the theme of the thinking. Bring your mind back to your point of attention. Next idea.
Equalizing the outgoing and incoming breath moving within the nostrils.
So now he's making reference to what we call pranayama, which can be very effective. Slows everything down. If you want a book on it, my favorite book on it is called Light on Pranayama by BKS Iyengar. It's still in print. It's excellent, but you don't need a lot of it. You can just be doing simple things like inhale to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4, exhale to the count of 4, relax to the count of 4, like this. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Relax, 2, 3, 4, etc. Another very simple one is what we call alternate nostril breathing. You do the same sort of thing. You plug one nostril with your fourth finger and the other one with your thumb. You do the same thing and you inhale through one nostril, exhale through the other, then inhale through that nostril, exhale through the other. Just helps balance out your energies. But the deeper thing he's implying here, frequently, the first place where we'll get a really silent mind is at that moment between the inhale and the exhale. Or sometimes exactly the opposite, between the exhale and the inhale. Just pay attention to the space, because thinking is frequently linked to the breathing. Now, in pranayama, there are all these bandhas that we do to stop the breathing and block energy and stuff like that. You can get into that if you want. These are very simple. Basically, just paying attention to the breath and noticing that point between the inhale and the exhale, and between the exhale and the inhale, where there's deep quiet, deep silence. Next idea.
With senses, mind, and intellect ever controlled, having liberation as a supreme goal.
Yes. So how do we control everything? Remember, you control a grosser part of your equipment by the subtler part. The mind has control over the senses and the body. The intellect has control over the mind. The way to control that is live in the witness. And then as your goal, find out who I is. Koham. Who am I? What is my essential nature? Remember, yourself is not something you're going to see. It's the one doing the seeing. Next idea.
Free from desire, fear, and anger, the sage is verily liberated forever.
So in this meditation, letting go of all your craving, all your desires for anything, and your fear. Fear will frequently come up. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Especially if you start having phenomena. Just let it go. No anger, no frustration, no annoyance. Dial everything down. No big deal in meditation. Let everything just end. Next idea.
That's it.
Okay, then we have one more verse, 29, correct?
Yes, just one more left. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvalokamaheshwaram tihridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shanti mrichati. knowing me as enjoyer of sacrifices and austerities, the great Lord of all worlds, the friend of all beings, he attains peace.
Yes. So working backwards, knowing me, Krishna. Remember when Krishna is talking about himself, he's not out there. He's talking about the self. So knowing yourself, you attain peace. Source of all, witness of all, the experiencer of everything. Here, when he says enjoyer, he means experiencer. I am that knows all sense perception, that knows all feelings, that knows all thoughts, that knows all images. I am none of those things. I am the illuminator. I let all of that phenomena go. Then the mind attains peace. And then it ends with the little Upanishad, and then we'll stop for the night.
Yeah. You want me to read it?
Yes.
Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagwad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjun Samvade Karma Samyasa Yogo Nam Panchamodhyayah.
Thus, in the Upanishads of the
Oh,
Bhagavad Gita,
yeah. Sorry, I missed that. Thus, in the Upanishad of the glorious Bhagwad Gita, in the science of the eternal, in the scripture of yoga, in the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, the fifth discourse ends entitled Yoga of True Renunciation.
any thoughts before we meditate?
Jim,
All
this
right.
is Fang. I have
Yes.
actually have two questions, if you don't mind. The questions are around meditation. The first one is, you say that we have to bring the mind to a single point. Can it be something as broad as silence? Listening for the underlying silence.
Sure. Sounds
Okay.
good to me.
Okay. And the second
And this doesn't mean that you have extended periods of thoughtlessness. If you can have moments of real quiet, just moments in a 30 or 40-minute meditation period, you're doing very well.
Okay. Thank you.
Your second question?
The second question has to do with breathing. I feel like a lot of times when I hear about meditation techniques, they keep on emphasizing that you should have long, deep, equal breathing. But I feel like sometimes my breath automatically becomes more shallow over time as I go into meditation. Should I just let it be natural, or should I try to go back into the long, deep breathing?
For people who are noisy minded and agitated, their shallow breathing is a function of anxiety and stress. So it's a value to learn to breathe very deeply from the belly. But in the end, what you want to do is forget your breathing.
Okay.
Unless that has become your point of attention.
It's not.
I was not taught to do a lot of attention to the breath when I learned to meditate. So, I'm there with you. Breath, did I have a breath? I don't know. Other people, it's a big deal. But there's no rule on it. Let me put it that way.
Okay. All right.
Did that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful.
In the end, you're not aware of your breathing.
Okay.
whether it be deep or shallow, like what body, what breath, where, you know. Good question. We will get into all this more deeply. He just gives us a taste in these 2 verses. The whole next chapter is all about meditation. All right, let's sit.